So the nation's top cop, sworn to uphold the law, struts into a Senate hearing like she's auditioning for the villain role in a bad political thriller. But instead of answering questions about Epstein's ghost files, Trump's revenge fantasies, and a DOJ that's starting to look like his personal hit squad, she spends 4.5 hours slinging insults, dodging like a pro wrestler, and treating Democratic senators like they're the punchline to her favorite Fox News joke. This, ladies and gentlemen, of course, is Pam Bondi, Attorney General, evasion artist extraordinaire, and the reason why I don't recall just might replace thoughts and prayers as America's go-to deflection. This one earned a satire trophy as the cold open on SNL this past Saturday, and we're ripping the mask off this circus, and trust me, it's equal parts infuriating and laughable. Hello, loyal listeners and newcomers, if there are any. You're listening to Your Neighbor on the Left, the podcast where we talk about liberal politics, human decency, and life on the blue side of America's ideological divide. My name is Don Spielis, your host. Today's main topic is the recent appearance of Attorney General Pam Bondi before Congress. If you caught any of the clips, you already know that it was about 45% dodging, 45% snark, and maybe, generously, 10% of actual information. Just what we all want from the USAG, not to mention it being a wonderful use of Congress's time. We're going to dig into it all shortly. But before we do that, let's cover some hot topics. I'm going to start off with a story that's a good bit different than what I usually do on this podcast. I'm going to take issue with the Democrat. As a Democrat myself, as someone who desires a party that stands for decency, for progress, without the poison of hate, reading about Jay Jones and his god-awful text messages feels like a knife to the ribs. This isn't some abstract scandal dropped from the right-wing fever swamps to trip us up. This is one of our own. A guy we put forward to be the next AG for Virginia. Casually spitting out fantasies of murder like it's water cooler talk. Murder of a political opponent, his wife, his children. And in this moment, with political violence clawing its way into our headlines every damn week, it's not just horrible. It's a betrayal. It's insane. A double gut punch that leaves me wondering what we've become. We're supposed to be the ones calling out the poison, demanding better, not shielding it. So let me lay this out, because ignoring this won't make it vanish. It just festers. We'll start with the texts themselves, because you need to hear how vile this is to grasp the rot. Back in August of 2022, Jay Jones, then a Democratic delegate from Norfolk, now the nominee for Virginia Attorney General, fires off these messages to Republican delegate Carrie Coyner. She's venting about Todd Gilbert, the GOP House Speaker at the time, who had the gall to honor a moderate Democrat in the chamber. Fair gripe? I mean, politics is a contact sport, but Jones, he doesn't stop at policy beef. No, he escalates straight off the rails. Quote, 3 people, 2 bullets, end quote, he writes. Quote, Gilbert, Hitler, and Pol Pot. Gilbert gets 2 bullets in the head. That's not hyperbole. That's a blueprint. And it gets worse. Infinitely worse. He imagines Gilbert's wife watching her own children die in her arms, typing out, quote, "Only when people feel pain personally do they move on policy," end quote. Pain, personal, like orphaned kids screaming in the night, is some twisted negotiation tactic. And for the chaser, he then writes, "I'll be at their funerals to piss on their graves. For every Republican breeding little fascists." Folks, read that again in your head. Piss on graves. Children dying. This is not edgy banter from a late night bull session. This is the kind of darkness that no one should ever commit to screen, let alone from someone who's supposedly sworn to uphold the law. As a father, as a human being, it makes me nauseous. How does a man who dreams up this nightmare get to stand for Attorney General? How does he sleep at night? And that's the horror in isolation, the raw, unfiltered ugliness of it. But in this climate, it's like pouring gasoline on a wildfire. We're not in some bygone era of polite disagreements anymore. Political violence isn't a fringe footnote. It's the bleeding headline. Just weeks ago, Charlie Kirk, yes, the conservative firebrand, was gunned down in what investigators are calling a politically motivated hit. A, quote, radical left shooter, they say, with a manifesto full of the same bile that poisons our feeds every day. Of course, before that, the Minnesota shooting of Representative Melissa Hortman, a Democrat gunned down in her own home, her husband as well, all tied to some twisted grudge over redistricting, and on it goes. I don't need to recap every story for you. You've heard them all multiple times. The numbers don't lie. CSIS reports a spike in left-wing attacks this year, mirroring the right's long shadow of stochastic terrorism. Feds are stretched thin, tracking plots from sea to shining sea, and here comes one of our guys, not just echoing the rage, but scripting it out in livid, vomit-inducing detail. Doubly unconscionable, try exponentially. In a country where a president's words can summon a mob at the Capitol, where social media turns whispers into weapons, Jones texts aren't harmless venting. They're a potential match. What if some unhinged listener, some kid radicalized on X, some copycat with a grudge, reads this and thinks, yeah, that's the blueprint? What then? Then we own that blood. As Democrats, we would have to own it. This isn't both sides this time. This is our ticket. Our failure to vet, our blind spot to the monster who we're flirting with. I'm disgusted. But here's where the rage really boils over. The party's response, or should I say the party's non-response. Jane Jones apologizes, calls it hypothetical and hyperbolic, says he regrets it deeply, swears it's not who he is now. Yeah, fine. Words are cheap when the damage is already done. But the silence from the top, the mealy-mouthed condemnations without a single voice yelling, "Step down," that's the unconscionable part. Abigail Spanberger, the gubernatorial nominee, calls it abhorrent and disgusting. That's the right words, but then what? She hems and haws about condemning violent language in general, like it's a policy paper, not a plea for a guy to quit before he drags us all under. Tim Kaine, still a supporter. Eugene Vindman, urging votes for the whole ticket, Jones included. Like nothing happened. No one's grabbing the bullhorn, no emergency caucus, no, Jay, for the love of God, withdraw and let us nominate someone who doesn't daydream about dead kids. No, instead, it's just darkness and crickets, or worse, deflection. Old news, they mutter. GOP smear, they say. As if the timing, text resurfacing right as early voting kicks off, isn't a gift wrap excuse to act. Republicans are hammering us. Trump on Truth Social calls it sick and demented. And, for once, it's hard to argue with them. J.D. Vance was tweeting. Glenn Youngkin called it beyond disqualifying. They're running ads about it, trying to attach it to every Democrat who's running. And, the thing is, it is disqualifying. But Democrats are standing pat. In Virginia, at best a purple state that could flip the script on the midterms, it's suicide. More than that, it's moral cowardice. We scream about accountability for the other side. Marjorie Taylor Greene's QAnon cosplay, Gates's grift, all of Trump's nonsense and the stuff from Stephen Miller. And then when it's us, we say give him a pass. Unconscionable. Straight up betrayal of every voter who trusted us to be adults in the room. We're supposed to be better than this. Well, I guess we used to be. What message does this send to the base? To kids watching? That violence is okay if it's just words. As long as it owns the other guy. Pause for a second, because I need you to feel this with me. I'm not just yelling at clouds here. This hits close. I'm the one who's on here twice a week defending Democrats, and, that happens in conversations I have too, and say, no, we're not the radicals, we're the reformers. But scandals like this, they make it awfully hard. They hand a megaphone to every Fox News chyron screaming, Democrats defend murder fantasies. And in this accelerating atmosphere of violence that we're in right now, where a congresswoman's home gets shot up over a vote, where threats spike 300% post-election, they make us complicit. Jones canceled a fundraiser after this blew up. At least there's a modicum of shame showing there, but it's too little too late. The party's machinery should be in overdrive. Replace them on the ticket. Rally behind a clean slate. Show the country we don't tolerate this nonsense. Because if we don't, then the blood's on our hands next time. Imagine it. Another Kirk or another Hortman, and the shooter with Jones' words bookmarked on their phone. How do we look in the mirror then? How do we preach unity while harboring this guy and his darkness? And look, I'm not naive. Politics is not a nice guy's game. And the right's got their graveyard full of ghouls. Trump's shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue quip, rally chants for lock her up. January 6th was not the picnic they tried to paint it as, but that's no excuse to sink to that level. If anything, it's the reason we're supposed to climb higher. We're supposed to be the party of FDR's fireside decency, of Obama's audacity of hope, not this. Not shielding a guy who equated a colleague with Hitler and Pol Pot, then scripted their executions like fan fiction. In Virginia's races, governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, this could torch any shot at holding the line in a state Trump barely lost last time. Polls already show independents peeling off, ads flooding the airwaves with those texts in 72-point font. But bigger than the ballots, it's the soul of the fight. If we can't purge it in our own camp, how do we demand better from the other? How do we lower the temperature when somebody who's one of our own is turning it into an inferno? So here's my line in the sand. J. Jones steps down today, not tomorrow, not after the headlines fade. They nominate someone worthy, a prosecutor with spine but without the sadism, a leader who fights with facts, not fantasies. And we do it loud, owning the mistake, apologizing not just to Gilbert's family, but to every Virginian who's ever feared a knock at the door. So call your reps, flood the inboxes, tag the big names on X. Hashtag drop Jones now. Because if we don't, we're not just losing elections in Virginia. We're losing the high moral ground, the trust, the very reason folks like me keep showing up and arguing these points. This violence, rhetorical or real, is a thief that's every day stealing democracy one thread at a time. Okay, now who would have thought changing the subject to Chicago would cool things down? But let's talk about Chicago, one of the two recent targets of presidential propaganda. It's a fundamental clash over who gets to call the shots in America. The president playing general in a city he doesn't govern, or the people elected to lead that city and state. On October 11th, a federal appeals court stepped in and blocked President Trump's push to deploy National Guard troops to the Chicago area without the governor's say-so. And make no mistake, this ruling is exactly what we need right now. It reins in an overreach that could have turned urban streets into flashpoints for unnecessary conflict. All built on a foundation of exaggerated fears and outright distortions about what's actually happening on the ground. I'll walk you through the facts, the law behind it, explained plain and simple, no legalese overload, and why this decision protects the balance of power that keeps our democracy from tipping into something more authoritarian. Because if we let the White House treat states like unruly colonies, what's left of federalism? The federalism that, by the way, the right has been saying they've championed all along. Okay, so first the basics of what went down, so we're all on the same page. A couple of weeks ago, as the government shutdown dragged into its second week, Trump announced he was federalizing, that's the key word, we'll unpack in a sec, parts of the Illinois National Guard. His goal? Send those troops rolling into Chicago and surrounding areas to restore public safety. The administration painted it as an emergency response to spiraling crime and unrest and what they called a breakdown in law enforcement, thanks to the shutdown's strain on local resources. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, a Democrat who's been vocal about clashing with Trump's agenda, said, in a word, hell no. He sued the administration, arguing this was presidential power grabbing at its worst, bypassing state authority and risking escalation in a city already on edge. A federal district judge in Chicago, April Perry, appointed by President Biden, agreed and issued a temporary block on October 10th. She called the deployment, quote, likely to lead to civil unrest, end quote, pointing to the potential for troops clashing with protesters or locals in a tinderbox atmosphere. Troops were already mobilizing from Texas and other states, but that judge's order halted them at the border, so to speak. Enter the appeals court. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, which covers Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. They didn't let the block stand entirely, but they didn't greenlight Trump's full plan either. In a ruling late on October 11th, the three-judge panel said the National Guard troops could remain under federal control for now, meaning Trump keeps the reins on their chain of command, but crucially, they upheld the ban on actually deploying those troops into Chicago or anywhere in Illinois until the full appeal plays out. It's a split decision. Federalization sticks for the moment, but boots on the ground are not happening. The court wants more briefing and arguments before deciding if this whole maneuver holds water. And that timeline, weeks, maybe months. In the meantime, no soldiers patrolling Lakeshore Drive or setting up checkpoints in Englewood. Pritzker hailed it as a win for state sovereignty. while Vice President Vance vowed the administration would keep fighting because, in their words, the crisis demands action. But let's peel back the layers on why this fight even exists and why the law sides with caution here. To understand the legal wrangling, think of it like this. The National Guard is America's Swiss Army knife for emergencies. Normally, it's under state control. Governors call them up for floods, riots, wildfires, things of that nature, like when Pritzker activated them during COVID for vaccination distribution or last summer's heat waves. It's a partnership. States handle their own turf, and the feds step back unless things go off the rails nationally. But presidents have tools to flip that switch. Trump invoked what's called Title 10 of the U.S. Code. Essentially, a federal statute that lets the commander-in-chief federalize the Guard during invasions, rebellions, or when state authorities can't handle a domestic emergency. He paired it with the Insurrection Act, an 1807 law that's been dusted off for everything from the Civil War to the 1992 LA riots. Now, the pitch here is that Chicago's crime is out of control, local cops are overwhelmed by the shutdown, and only Uncle Sam can save the day. It sounds pretty straightforward, right? Except here's the rub. That emergency bar is high, and courts don't just rubber stamp it. Pritzker's lawsuit zeroed in on a few core principles any average Joe can grasp. First, federalism, the idea baked into our Constitution that states aren't federal subsidiaries. The 10th Amendment reserves powers not given to Washington for the states, including policing their own streets. Deploying troops without the governor's nod, that's like your boss sending security guards to your house because he doesn't like your neighborhood watch. Judge Perry bought that argument, ruling that Trump's move likely violated the Administrative Procedure Act, the law that says federal agencies can't act arbitrarily or capriciously. She pointed to evidence from Illinois officials, no formal request for help from local law enforcement, no data showing an imminent insurrection, and plenty of proof that Chicago PD and state resources were holding the line. Plus, she flagged the Posse Comitatus Act. You've heard that on here before. A post-Reconstruction safeguard that bars the military from domestic law enforcement unless Congress or the president explicitly says otherwise. And why you don't see Army Rangers busting drug deals in Baltimore. He keeps the olive drab out of everyday policing to avoid martial law vibes. The appeals court nodded to some of that, but hit pause. They said federalization under Title 10 is probably kosher. Presidents get wide latitude there as long as it's not a total sham. Remember Bush during the Ferguson unrest? So precedents exist, but on deployment, they kept Perry's block intact, citing serious questions about whether this crosses into Posse Comitatus territory or just plain overreach. In plain English, yeah, you can call the troops to the phone, Mr. President, but you can't send them knocking on doors without proving the house is truly on fire. The panel, 2 Trump appointees and 1 Obama pick, wants a deeper dive, including whether the shutdown, which Trump could end with a signature, justifies overriding a governor. It's a procedural win for the White House, keeping their options open, but a substantive victory for Illinois. No tanks in the loop just yet. And that's crucial. Rushing troops in could spark the very unrest Perry warned about, turning a policy spat into street-level chaos. Now, why is this ruling spot on? because it forces accountability in a system designed for checks, not unchecked executive fiat. Trump's not wrong that presidents can federalize the guard. That's in the playbook. But the why part matters. This isn't D-Day. It's domestic drama amplified by shutdown stalemate. Illinois argued, and the courts agreed enough to pause, that local leaders are best positioned to assess threats. Chicago's mayor, Brandon Johnson, testified that crime rates are stable. Homicides down 15% year over year, thanks to community policing investments. And the shutdowns hit is manageable without bayonets. Flooding the streets with out-of-state troops, that risks alienation, escalation, and lawsuits galore. We've seen it before. Kent State in 1970, Ferguson in 2014. Moments where military presence poured gas on the fire. The appeals court restraint says, prove your case, upholding the rule of law over the rule of impulse. It's a bulwark against turning every blue city gripe into a federal invasion, preserving that delicate state-federal dance our founders obsessed over. But here's where it gets infuriating, and where there's a dash of skepticism warranted. The entire push rests on the administration's portrayal of Chicago, and, for the sake of argument, Portland, as Mad Max wastelands, a narrative that's much more smoke and mirrors than hard stats. Trump and his team have been hammering this since September, claiming these cities are rife with crime and unrest, living in hell, even war-ravaged, zones where law enforcement is under siege. Vance echoed it on Fox. Portland's a no-go zone. Chicago's bleeding out. Sounds terrifying, doesn't it? Like you wouldn't walk Michigan Avenue without a flak jacket. Except when you drill into the data, it's a house of cards. Grand exaggerations laced with outright lies, cherry-picked anecdotes twisted into apocalypse porn. Take Portland first, since it's the blueprint for this Chicago stunt. Trump announced guard deployments there in late September, citing anarchist violence and a crime wave post-2020 protests. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem went further, tweeting about laser tag threats from Antifa groups aiming beams at federal agents, implying some Black Mirror siege. Reality? Portland's violent crime is plummeting in 2025. Homicides are down 52% from last year. Shootings down 33%, as per Oregon State Police data. Mayor Ted Wheeler's office reports property crimes stabilizing as well, thanks to new violence intervention programs. That laser tag flap? It was a satirical ad from a local activist group. 0 incidents. Just DHS hype to justify unmarked vans rolling through Rose City. And the fearful resident in gas mask clip? Fact-checkers traced it to a 2023 wildfire evacuation, not current unrest. Oregon Governor Tina Kotek called it a false narrative meant to spur conflict, and she's got the numbers. No state of emergency, no governor request for feds. It's political theater. Trump auditioning his Law & Order sequel using Portland as the set because it rhymes with his 2020 rally cries. Chicago's no different. Just swap in rain-slick streets for Lake Michigan winds. The White House briefing on October 8th claimed over 500 homicides this year. A 20% spike that shuts down entire precincts. Trump amplified it on Truth Social. Slaughter in the streets. Dems let it happen. The catch? Chicago's on pace for 550 homicides total. Still tragic, but flat from 2024 and way down from 2021's peak of 798. Chicago PD's own dashboard shows violent crime dipping 8% citywide, with summer hotspots like Austin seeing targeted drops from youth outreach. The shutdown strain? Locals say it's real. Fewer feds means backlog deportations, but not to the point of collapse. ICE even feuded publicly with Chicago PD, accusing them of dereliction for not jumping on an immigration call. Turns out, officers did respond, but prioritized a simultaneous shooting. Exaggeration or fabrication? A September 28th admin report cited riots nightly in both cities, yet Portland PD logged 0 such events in the last month, and Chicago's last major protest dust-up was a peaceful climate march. It's not spin so much as it is a script, feeding the base's fears while ignoring root fixes like funding community programs over camo fatigues. This misinformation isn't harmless. It's the spark that justifies the overreach. By hyping phantoms, the administration lowers the bar for that emergency invocation, eroding trust in the very institutions meant to protect us. The appeals court's pause gives breathing room to call it out. Demand real data, not doctored dread. And for the average person, it means your tax dollars aren't wasted on showy standoffs when cities are already grinding through real challenges. Poverty, underfunded schools, mental health crisis that no Humvee can fix. So where does this leave us? Troops sidelined, appeal grinding on, and a reminder that courts aren't just robes and gavels. They're the grown-ups enforcing the rules when politicians play loose. Trump's team will appeal higher, maybe even to the Supreme Court. But for now, Illinois breathes easier. And that's a win for all of us who believe power should check itself. This ruling isn't anti-Trump, it's pro-Constitution. Keeping the military in its lane so democracy doesn't need dress blues to function. If anything, it challenges him to lead with solutions, not soldiers. End the shutdown, fund the cops properly, address the inequities fueling the frustration. Until then, we'll watch the law do what leaders won't. Draw the line. Now this is one that I know everyone's heard of. Donald J. Trump, the self-proclaimed dealmaker of the century, the guy who turned "you're fired" into a lifestyle brand, did not win the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize. Shocker, right? I mean, who could have seen this coming from the man who spent the last 9 months turning the Oval Office into a telethon begging for Scandinavian gold stars? But fear not, we're going to unpack it all. His year-long pathetic puppy dog pleading for the prize. Like, has anyone ever groveled that hard before? His fairy tale fanfic about ending wars that are still very much in full swing in some cases. The fact that his big nomination came courtesy of Benjamin Netanyahu, who's got an international criminal court warrant hotter than a Florida parking lot for war crimes. Trump's latest fever dream, where the actual winner supposedly rang him up to hand over the dedication on a silver platter, except, plot twist, those statements he yaps about, unverified. Whispers, even in her own sit-down with that French newspaper. Oh, and the Nobel Committee head honcho dropping truth bombs about needing courage and integrity in winners, which, let's be real, is Nobel speak for nice try, Donnie, but you're about as integrous as a wet paper towel. And topping it off, that shiny new Israeli-Palestinian ceasefire that was supposed to be the crown jewel of his first 9 months in his second term, it got inked while he was holed up in the White House, yucking it up with RFK about circumcisions and autism rates like it was Casual Friday at the Conspiracy Cafe. So let's do a little autopsy on Trump's Nobel non-victory, and hopefully by the end, you'll be toasting with whatever's in your mug to the sweet sound of karma's slow clap. First off, let's talk about the campaign trail that's had nothing to do with ballots and everything to do with begging for an award. All year, all freaking year, Trump's been out there acting like the Nobel is his birthright, a participation trophy for not blowing up the planet yet. Remember, back in February, he's schmoozing Netanyahu in the Oval, whining, "They'll never give me one, 'cause it's all rigged for libs." By the time we got to summer, it's full-on lobby-palooza. World leaders getting earfuls, Truth Social posts screaming, "I deserve it more than Obama." Yeah, because brokering a deal with the Taliban and Qatar while troops are still dodging IEDs is totally on par with, actual peace, I guess. And don't forget the 11th hour Gaza hostage swap he announced just days before the headline. Like, see, peace. Give me the prize. This guy's turned humble brag into a national security briefing. Has anyone ever done this before? Well, how about Obama? Nah, he showed up to the ceremony looking surprised as hell, like he'd wandered into the wrong IKEA. Carter moonlighted on habitat builds, not nominate me billboards. Hell, even Putin doesn't publicly pester for one. He just sends Wagner goons as thank you notes. Trump's out here like a kid at the science fair, waving his diorama, yelling, mine's the best, teacher, right? It's not leadership, of course. It's midlife crisis, or late life crisis, I guess in his case, with a gold medal fetish. And the kicker is that the deadline for nominations was February 1st. So everything that he might have done in reality or in his own head since then is all for naught. Like showing up at the party after, the cakes and crumbs. Now, speaking of delusions, let's talk about Trump's greatest hits album, The Wars I Ended Remix. Oh boy, where to start? He's been peddling some version of this whopper since his first term, but now in 2025, he's cranked it up to 11, claiming he's wrapped up 7 wars. 6 this year, 1 carryover from the last time. So 7. Like he's playing geopolitical whack-a-mole. At the UN in September, he struts up to the podium, all puff-chested. I ended 7 unendable wars. Boom. Peace out. Well, he likes to take credit for ISIS, but mostly what he inherited from Obama was the caliphate's coffin. By 2019, they were down to flip phone propaganda, not your fire and fury. Afghanistan, well, you greenlit the Doha deal that left Biden holding the evacuation bag, 13 dead troops on the tarmac. The whole ending the Ukraine war on day one has dragged on to October. And honestly, as far as the Gaza ceasefire is concerned, claiming you ended the war by backing up one side to the point where capitulation was inevitable and then not being involved in the negotiations about the ceasefire at all seems like quite a reach to count as a Nobel bona fide. But in the end, it's just Trump's normal tactic. Say it loud, say it proud, say it till the servers crash. But if ending wars means rebranding chaos as mission accomplished, then I guess, yeah, he's Picasso. But as for the Nobel, that's like nominating an arsonist for Firefighter of the Year, because he mostly singed the curtains. But let's talk a little bit more about his nomination. Enter stage far-right Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump's Nobel fairy godmother who tossed his hat in the ring back in July with all the subtlety of a tank parade. Donnie deserves it, BB Beams. Like he's pitching a buddy for Employee of the Month. Renewed the endorsement just last week, too. Desperate times, desperate allies. But here's the spicy irony. Netanyahu's resume? International Criminal Court arrest warrant for war crimes in Gaza. Alleged starvation tactics. Civilian bombings. The whole genocidal greatest hits. The Hague's got him on speed dial, and he's out here vouching for Trump to get a peace prize? It's like Charles Manson recommending you for preschool teacher. Trump's like, my nomination's legit, while ignoring the bloodstains on the envelope. And get this, Bibi's push came amid Trump's Gaza glad-handing, but the actual ceasefire hammered out on October 8th through 10th, while Trump's White House was a clown convention with RFK Jr. jawing about circumcision rates spiking autism like it's settled science from the tinfoil seminary. Hostage swapping, aid trucks revving, and Trump's deep in the vaccine shed. Peak multitasking fail. Too late for the Nobel deadline anyway, because, as I said, the nominations closed months ago. But, great optics. Peace breaks out off camera while you're doing press gaggles with Dr. Oz and RFK Jr. But yes, anyway, if Benjamin Netanyahu is your character witness, you should probably be reevaluating your life choices. And then, of course, there's the post-loss pearl clutching. Trump's hot take on the winner herself, Maria Corina Machado, the Venezuelan firebrand who snagged the prize for staring down Maduro's dictatorship like it's yesterday's bad haircut. Solid pick, tireless dissent, barred from elections, still rallying the masses for democracy. But Trump? Of course, he spins it into his sequel. She called me personally. She said I really deserved it. Dedicated the whole thing to me. Cue the Mar-a-Lago victory lap. Except, peel back the foil. Now, Machado did nod to his decisive support in her dedication to Venezuela's suffering and Trump. But those juicy "you should have won" quotes that he keeps parroting, no verification. Even the chat she had with the French newspaper mentions zilch about handing him the crown jewels. It's Trump telepathy. He hears "thanks, Don," and upgrades it to "you're the greatest of all time." Reuters caught him Friday night all smug. Quote, "She accepted it, but said I earned it," end quote. Accepted what exactly? The prize or your ego transplant? The White House, of course, piled on. Committee chose politics over peace. Machado's out there thanking him politely in BBC interviews, saying things like grateful for global peace pushes, but it's diplomatic dip, not dedication delirium. Trump's twisting gratitude into something it totally is not. But again, that's the norm. When facts flop, just fabricate the fiction. And I've saved my favorite part for last. The Nobel Committee's chair, Jürgen Watney-Fiednes, post-announcement amid Trump's tantrum tweets, Fiednes steps up and says, essentially, winners require courage and integrity. Mic drop. Not a direct Trump's a coward claim, mind you, but fact checks debunk the viral "he lacks both" meme. That part was fake news, but I mean, come on. In the shadow of this year-long gimme, gimme, gimme from Trump, it was clear what his response meant. Fiednes justified the snub as prioritizing real grit over pressure campaigns. But, of course, none of that will register with the president. It's just another round of yelling rigged, like he has with every loss or every snub that he's experienced in his life. But deep down, I think it's the integrity gut punch that stings. He spent much more time campaigning for the award than actually doing anything to earn the award. He's nominated by someone who's won it for war crimes, wasn't directly involved in what he claims is his biggest kudo and reason why he deserved the award, and we got as direct an answer from the chair of the Nobel Committee as to why Trump was never really in the running for the award in the first place. And that brings us to today's main topic, focused on Pam Bondi's epic Senate showdown last Thursday, October 7th, 2025. 4.5 hours of what can only be described as congressional dodgeball, where the ball is taxpayer accountability and Bondi's got the reflexes of a caffeinated cat. She showed up with a folder full of actual zingers, carrying no remorse and an attitude that screamed, "I'm not here to answer questions, I'm here to own the libs." Democrats grilled her on everything from Epstein cover-ups to Trump's tweet storm, and her response, a masterclass in evasion, topped with personal attacks that make middle school bullies look polite. We're talking things like failed lawyer, Antifa buddy, gutter dweller, all these things hurled at senators like confetti at a party. Now, don't get me wrong, many congresspersons on both sides deserve a regular dressing down, but there's a time and a place. By the end of the fiasco last Thursday, even the C-SPAN interns were probably Googling how to erase memories. So let's look at it all. Her sassy shutdowns, the legal lines she tap danced over, and why history's full of dodgers who got away with it, just like she's betting she will. So you'll laugh, you'll groan, and you'll probably wonder if this is what draining the swamp really looks like when the swamp fights back with hairspray and high heels. Pour yourself something strong, and let's dive in, because if Bondi's testimony is the new normal, we might as well get popcorn subscriptions. Okay, so let's set the scene, because this wasn't just a hearing, it was a spectacle. Picture the Senate Judiciary Committee room. Stuffy suits, flickering fluorescents, and enough tension to power a small city's grid. On one side, Democrats like Dick Durbin, Richard Blumenthal, and the rest of the oversight squad, armed with subpoenas and a healthy dose of what the hell is going on in the DOJ. On the other, Pam Bondi, Trump's hand-picked Attorney General, striding in like she owns the joint. Florida's former prosecutor turned Trump whisperer, the woman who once chased down Medicare fraud like it owed her money, now reduced to this: a 4.5-hour filibuster disguised as testimony. And folks, the attitude? Oh, chef's kiss of combativeness. From the opening gavel, Bondi wasn't testifying, she was performing. Defensive? Feral is a better word. Snarky? She brought the full arsenal. Senator Durbin, the elder statesman with the voice like warm gravel, hits her with basics. Why the stonewall on the Epstein docs? Bondi's response doesn't miss a beat. No client list exists. Oh, and why didn't you drop the flight logs back in 2023, Senator? Too busy with your shutdown sideshow? Pivot City. It's like watching a lawyer cross-examining her own shadow. And don't get me started on the evasion playbook. Every question lands like a wet noodle on Teflon. Comey? Pending review. Next. Firing U.S. attorneys who wouldn't play ball on Trump's enemy list. Personnel matters. Privileged. National Guard rolling into Chicago without the governor's nod. If you're not protecting your people, Mr. President will. Deal with it. Homan's shady 50 grand tape from some border baron. No wrongdoing. Call the FBI. And Trump's X-rants, the ones where he's screaming, lock up Schiff and fry Letitia James. Bondi's response, he's the most transparent president ever. Unlike some. It's deflection on steroids, wrapped in a bow of blame the liberals. Blumenthal called it a new low for attorneys general. Combativeness, evasiveness, deceptiveness, all in one tidy package. Of note were her very specific and personal comebacks, like she prepared with a dossier of dirt instead of documents. Durbin flat out said, a disappointment. She came ready to fight, not to inform. And fight she did. This wasn't oversight. It was an obstacle course. Jump the question, duck the follow-up, flip the script. If Bondi's testimony was a weather report, it would be partly evasive with a chance of attitude storms. She treated the Senate like a heckler's gallery at her comedy club. Just fuel for the fire. Remember when she snapped at White House over Epstein smears? You sit there making salacious remarks, slandering the president, while you took cash from his cronies. Oof. It's not just avoidance, it's weaponized whataboutism. And the kicker, she did it all under oath, with that steely gaze and Florida tan, like she's daring them to call her bluff. Well, spoiler, they didn't. Not yet. But oh, the theater. Imagine if your boss called you into a review and you responded with, nice tie, do they sell men's clothes where you bought it? That was Bondi's energy. Pure, unfiltered, and utterly unaccountable. All right, so take a deep breath, because if the attitude was the appetizer, the personal attacks were the main course. And boy, did Pam come at it with flair. This woman didn't just dodge, she counterpunched like she had Mike Tyson in her earpiece. She pulled zingers from that infamous manila folder like it was her personal roast script, courtesy of Mar-a-Lago comedy writers. Why answer a question when you can accuse the asker of being a clown? And there's a name for that. Trumpism 101. Never apologize, always escalate. And escalate she did. So let's talk about some specifics here. First up, Adam Schiff, the California congressman with the laser-focused stare and a resume longer than Bondi's list of deflections. Schiff asks her questions about DOJ's weaponization against Trump's foes. Fair game subject, right? Bondi lights him up like a Roman candle. Failed lawyer, liar, you'd be fired on day one under my watch for that impeachment circus. Schiff pushes back. He said, these are canned attacks. And on his oversight push, 5 minutes of fame, that's all this is. It's like she scanned his Wikipedia page overnight and weaponized every edit. The White House tweet storm afterwards, Bondi exposes Schiff's sham. Sham. Coming from the Attorney General shielding Epstein's Rolodex. Pot, kettle, black. Then there's Mazie Hirono, the Hawaii senator who's forgotten more about tough questions than most rookies ever learn. Hirono probes the politicization angle. Standard fare. Bondi goes full tabloid. You were on video protesting with Antifa outside the White House. Does that make you an Antifa member? The room freezes. Hirono blinks, and Bondi smirks like she just dropped the mic. The White House amplified it faster than a viral video of a cat. Highlighting Dem hypocrisy, gold. Hypocrisy. Says the woman whose DOJ is chasing deep state ghosts while ignoring Trump's rally chance for vengeance. But Hirono didn't take the bait, which is, a classy move. But come on, Pam. Antifa? In 2025? That's not testimony, that's time traveling. Dick Durbin gets the Chicago special because nothing says national security like a local beef. Durbin, why the guard override in my city? Bondi's response, I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate Trump. Dan piles on, your shutdown left feds unpaid while we're working overtime. Unpaid feds in Trump's economy. That is rich. A billionaire lecturing on bootstraps. Durbin, to his credit, stayed cool, but you could hear the eyes rolling off screen. And then there was Richard Blumenthal, who drew the short straw, pushing on integrity lapses. Blumenthal gets interrupted mid-sentence. I'm not getting into the gutter with you, says Pam. Pause for effect. Then the haymaker. And don't lecture me on integrity. You lied about Vietnam service to win your seat. Ancient history, Pam? That's not a comeback. That's dredging the mud for mudslinging points. Blumenthal's been owning that for decades. But in a hearing, it's desperate, like a boxer past prime swinging wild. And then Sheldon Whitehouse and Peter Welch round out the roast. Whitehouse on Epstein funding ties. Bondi says salacious slander from a guy who's pocketed Epstein cash. Welch implies she's telling lies about Homan. Don't call me a liar. The folder flips like a poker tell. Prepped, pointed, and personal. By the end, it's not a hearing. It's Mean Girls Capital Edition. Bondi as Regina George. Senators as the plastics targets. Snarky, of course, but it's the AG's job to serve justice, not shade. If this is restoring DOJ trust, I'm the Queen of England. Now, here's the part to take away from this. If you were a fan of Pam Bondi, you might grin and giggle at the way she hit some of these congresspersons with some zingers. And, so be it. But keep in mind that comment I made earlier about time and place. If you want to fire these things out on social media, if you want to call a press conference and you want to tell jokes about the opposition, I guess there's nothing anyone would do to stop you. But when you appear in front of Congress and you swear under oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, we, as the people who put you all in office, feel like we should get answers to questions. If we want comedy, we'll turn on Comedy Central. If you're sitting down in front of C-SPAN to watch one of these hearings, or, even at the very least, reading about them afterwards in your favorite news source, comedy is not what you're looking for. And the fact that this travesty, this farce, was allowed to continue, and there will be no repercussions, not just for the snark, but for the total lack of honesty, seriousness, or integrity, let alone information. Well, it's just a travesty. It's a sign of everything that's wrong with the system as we have it today. I've said it before, and I'll end this segment on this note. When witnesses are called before Congress and sworn in, the same rules should apply as when a witness is called to testify in court and they're sworn in. If you lie, you should be held accountable. If you are asked a question, you should have to answer it unless you are pleading the fifth. Pure and simple. And I'll flip the script a little bit and say that as far as the people asking the questions should fit the scope of the hearing. No more of these horse and pony shows where there is a budget hearing and they bring up all sorts of other political things to talk about just because the right person happens to be the one testifying. If we can't count on these hearings to produce real information based on real questions, there's no point in having them. And now for this week's High Note. As we wrap up another episode, let's lean into something that restores a bit of faith in humanity's pull towards healing. In the shadow of the Gaza ceasefire, sealed just days ago on October 10th, the real stories aren't in the summits or the statements. They're in the quiet miracles. Families torn apart for nearly 2 years, now reaching across divides to hold each other again. And woven through it all, a surge of aid that's breathing life back into communities on the brink. This isn't about glory or geopolitics. It's about people, plain and profound, finding their way home. Take the Cohen family, if you will. Their story is one that's echoing from Tel Aviv to the world this week. It starts on October 7th, 2023, when 19-year-old Matan Cohen, a fresh-faced Israeli soldier, was captured near the Gaza border amid the chaos that swallowed 250 lives that day. Matan vanished into the tunnels. His parents, Rachel and David, left with a son's dog tags and a void that time could not fill. 2 years of vigils, of advocacy walks through Jerusalem streets, of holidays marked by an empty chair at the table. Rachel told reporters last week, her voice crackling but steady, "Every night I replayed his laugh, his silly jokes about burning dinner. We held on to that." And now, as the first phase of the ceasefire kicks in, Matan's among the 20 living hostages slated for release. Pale perhaps, gaunt from captivity, but alive, handed over to the Red Cross and ferried to a military base for that first tear-streaked embrace. David's words shared in a family video that's gone viral on X. "We're not heroes. We're just parents getting our boy back." Imagine it. The airport tarmac. El Al pilots pausing flights to welcome boarding families with speeches of solidarity. Today we fly not just passengers, but miracles home. For the Cohens, it's a reunion laced with the ache of time lost, but blooming with plans. Barbecues, university dreams, maybe even that long-delayed family trip to Galilee. Stories like theirs, euphoric, uneasy, profoundly human, are multiplying. Siblings racing to hospitals for checkups, grandparents clutching photos turned real. After 731 days of not knowing, these moments are like oxygen. And it's not just one side of the line. The ceasefire's bargain, those 20 souls for some 2,000 Palestinian detainees, ripples back into Gaza with equal weight. Picture the flip. In West Bank villages and Gaza enclaves, families like the Al-Masris, who've waited years for sons and brothers held on security charges, now scanning lists for names that mean freedom. One mother, interviewed by the BBC amid the anticipation, clutched a faded photo of her 22-year-old, arrested during a 2022 protest. He was studying engineering. Now he'll build again. For us, for home. Releases like these aren't abstract. They're brothers walking dusty roads back to olive groves, wives planning weddings postponed by bars and wire. The International Committee of the Red Cross, facilitating the handoffs, calls it a thread of hope in the fabric of suffering, with detainees emerging to cheers and home-cooked meals that taste like resurrection. But the ceasefire's true humanitarian pulse, it's in the aid now flowing through. Fuel tankers rumbling over borders, medical crates stacking in Khan Yunis, bakeries firing up from under UN wings. Dozens of trucks crossed from Egypt Sunday alone, doubling to 600 daily, carrying flour for flatbreads, insulin for diabetics, tents for the displaced heading north to Gaza City. Palestinians, gaunt from famine's edge, rushed towards those convoys, not with desperation, but with dawning relief. The World Food Programme's scaling ops mean school lunches resuming, clinics restocking for the malnourished kids who've known too much hunger. It's not erasure of scars. Gaza's wounds run deep. But it's a pause, a chance for mothers to feed their little ones without rationing tears. As one aid worker put it in a Reuters dispatch, for the first time in months, we're delivering hope in 50-kilo sacks. In this fragile window, amid the politics that birthed it, these threads, reunions, releases, relief, remind us why ceasefires matter. Not for maps redrawn, but lives reclaimed. The Cohens hugging Matan under airport lights. The Al-Masris frying falafel for a son home at last. The Gaza child biting into bread that's more than sustenance. It's the quiet power of humanity refusing to stay broken. So if today's episode left you weary, hold on to this. Good isn't gone. It's just waiting for us to notice. And that brings this episode of Your Neighbor on the Left to a close. I want to thank everyone who took the time to download this episode and listen. I'd love to hear from you. I say this every week. You can use any of the social media platforms for the podcast, all of which are listed on the Linktree page, and the address of the Linktree page is in the podcast description. Please reach out with comments, compliments, insults, critiques, whatever it is that you want to say. I'm interested in hearing it. I'll be back again on Friday with another episode of Back Porch Files, the supplemental episodes. Until then, stay engaged, stay kind, and as always, have the week you'd wish for others.